Look, y'all have worked hard all year. You have made the best of this utterly horrible situation we're all in.
As someone who went into teaching straight out of undergrad, I've never not had summer vacation. I've cycled through all of them with the almost certain knowledge of what came next: school. That's been interrupted this year for all of us. In this week's episode, we'll hear from teachers about change and continuity, about what problems seem to persist across time and circumstance, and about moments of transformation. This is Homework, and I'm Ashraya Gupta.
I had heard about a protest for Black trans lives. Um, I saw this poster, they're doing it in front of the Brooklyn Museum. No cops, no permit, everyone wear white, like, bet. Perfect. Couldn't think of a better way to spend a Sunday.
That's Lucas, whose voice you might remember from a previous episode. Back then, he was in his apartment during New York's curfew, listening to protesters, unsure about how to take part. A few weeks later, he found his way.
And I call up my cousin who was at a protest a couple weeks ago. And he had been saying if I wanted to go to anything, like, let's meet up, let's go. He's very tall and white. So yeah, he wanted to show up as he could. We're also both queer, so it seemed like it was a good opportunity for some intersectional familial solidarity. So then we go to the Brooklyn Museum, and I didn't know what to expect as far as turnout went, because there have been so many protests, and there's a part of me that's worried, oh, okay, the turnout's gonna it's gonna thin out over the next couple of weeks. And I also thought, especially with, like, just the general anti-blackness and transmisogyny and transmisogynoir of America, who knows how many people are going to show up to this. But I definitely made sure to wear a white t-shirt, and as I'm walking along Eastern Parkway, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm seeing a lot of people in white right now. Like, maybe there will be a decent turnout for this.
One of the inspirations for the Brooklyn rally was the Silent Parade of 1917, when the NAACP organized some 10,000 people to wear white and silently march down Fifth Avenue, following a spring and summer marked by lynchings and violence against Black people in Waco, Memphis, and St. Louis. Over a century later, drag queen and organizer West Dakota worked with a slew of other activists across Brooklyn to organize the event in little over a week.
And then we get there, and it is packed, like, from the entrance to the Brooklyn Museum all the way across Eastern Parkway. People are everywhere. And at first, it was just sort of people, like, standing around. And then at one point, everything gets quiet. There's this moment of silence spanning across what ended up being a 15,000 person crowd. And then suddenly, the folks at the front, the organizers on top of the stairs at the Brooklyn Museum, start chanting, "Black trans lives matter." And it keeps growing and growing and growing. Everyone is yelling it. Black trans lives matter. Black trans lives matter. Black trans lives matter. Black trans lives matter. It was an incredibly moving moment to be a part of. Trump had just decided to say that, queer and trans folks were not guaranteed health care, that medical workers, doctors could deny people health care or treatment based on being trans or queer.
The Trump administration regulation, announced on the 4-year anniversary of the Pulse massacre, limits the definition of sex discrimination so that it does not include protections for transgender people. According to the regulation, the federal government no longer recognizes gender identity as an avenue for sex discrimination in healthcare.
And I don't know if it was because of that. I don't know if it was because the tapes of Leilene Extravaganza Polanco being left to die as she was experiencing a seizure got released, but something in the air was activated, and people really showed up, and it was one of those moments that made me think, like, wow, something might really be happening here.
I remember I wrote this op-ed in the student newspaper when I was a senior, advocating that teachers should try to have more personal relationships with their students.
Steve, like Lucas, is a teacher at my school, Harvest Collegiate.
And it got very strong pushback for a couple of different reasons from a couple of different people. But I will never forget the letter to the editor that my AP English teacher, Mrs. Reed, wrote, where she called my views naive and didactic, and that they were totally unrealistic.
I sometimes think Steve still has a straight through line to what it's like to be a teenager, frustrated by the irrational, arbitrary actions of the supposed grown-ups in our world. I can easily picture him voicing these views. Of course, as he gets older, the way he's seen has changed, and these days, Steve is more wary of setting himself up as a model of how or what to teach, in part because of where we now teach.
When I taught, my students in the Bronx were 100% black and brown, and probably 70% Puerto Rican and Dominican. And another 20% of the black students were almost entirely West Indian. So almost everyone was Caribbean. So there's an easy angle to present U.S. history there that's gonna engage everyone, and it's one that emphasizes immigrants, that emphasizes race, which is how I approach history too, and how I see the story of U.S. history. That race is central to it.
One of the classes at Harvest is called American Stories and is essentially about this idea that there are narratives that get told that we can look at to make sense of the America we live in now. Recently, some students called into question this framing, suggesting it meant we were pitching stories of oppression against one another. We sent out a summer assignment, and they found fault with the question, which story matters most?
Our school is more heterogeneous than my schools in the Bronx and Brooklyn, not just because, we have white and Asian kids, but also the places, our Latino population is much more diverse than the Latino population I used to teach. We have kids from all over Central America and South America. We have white kids who are first and second generation immigrants from Eastern Europe. We have, the people who have immigrated from China are insanely diverse in their backgrounds and their parents' educational backgrounds, and urban versus rural. So lots of kids and where they come from have lots of different views about the United States. And so we have a group of students who aren't totally comfortable with that fully critical U.S. is racist view of the United States. And so I found I've had to kind of soften my entry points a bit for students, and give them more, not say here's a story, here's another story, but make it more so here's some evidence of stuff that happened. How do you interpret it?
This is tricky pedagogical work, difficult, painstaking, and requiring real vulnerability. I'm not sure that schools, perhaps especially progressive schools, have grappled with being sites of racial oppression themselves. Being integrated gives us an opportunity. We have the chance to do something different, or we can stumble into simply mirroring broader patterns of injustice.
I teach histories that aren't talked about at, more left-leaning schools like Harvest. I teach about the history of religion and evangelicalism as a core part of the United States history, because it is. I teach about the history of the conservative movement, because that's really freaking important. And so because I put those things in the curriculum, kids are more willing to have a true, open, honest, intellectual engagement with the past. And when you do that, I think you tend to come to some certain conclusions about the United States, particularly when it comes to race.
Summer school has just started, and Mayor de Blasio has promised that school will be in person come September. Both Governor Cuomo and the teachers union have called this premature. The New York City Department of Education has yet to issue a plan for the fall, only some recommendations for reviewing school facilities. Still, teachers interacting with students, wondering how to meet their needs, struggling to dismantle their own biases, those struggles will continue regardless of what form our classes and schools take. Thank you to Steve and Lucas for taking the time to talk with me. I use first names here, but Steve Lazar is an Academy for Teachers Fellow and a PhD candidate in history at the CUNY Grad Center. Homework is presented in collaboration with the Academy for Teachers. If you have a story to share about schools or teaching, you can reach us at thisishomeworkpod@gmail.com.